Okay, good morning, everyone. I'm Luis da Silva, and I'm the Executive Director of the Commonwealth Cyber Initiative, and I'm also the Bradley Professor of Cybersecurity at Virginia Tech. So first, I want to thank you all for coming today and joining us for the second in a series of webinars in the CCI Cyber Leadership Series. So these are about 15 to 20-minute webinars where we address some questions in the technical space of the Commonwealth Cyber Initiative, and we talk to some of our researchers who are doing work in areas that are particularly relevant in times of this COVID-19 crisis. So first of all, let me just remind those who don't know about CCI that our mission in CCI is research with economic impact at the intersection of security, autonomous systems, and data. And CCI is an initiative of the Commonwealth of Virginia. And as part of our mission, we have an outreach and economic development role. And in the current moment, we are using that remit to actually cover some areas in CCI that we believe are directly relevant to the current crisis that we're all facing. So if you have any questions, we'll take them after the webinar, so please type them into the Q&A box. And our topic today is communication networks in times of social distancing. So our speaker is Professor Scott Mitkiff. Scott is the Vice President for Information Technology and the Chief Information Officer at Virginia Tech. He's also a professor in the Bradley Department of Electrical and Computer Engineering and has bachelor's, master's, and PhD degrees all in electrical engineering, a bachelor's from Duke, master's from Stanford, and a PhD from Duke again. And he's an expert in wireless networks and pervasive computing. Has been very involved through the years on distance learning and online education. And in Scott's current role at Virginia Tech, he has responsibility for the strategy and delivery of Virginia Tech's mission in IT services and infrastructure that supports the teaching, research, and outreach missions of the university. So I think he has had a very key role in this transition to an online mode of operation over the last few weeks. So I'm really delighted to have Scott joining us today. I've also worked with Scott for more than 20 years, so it's particularly nice to interact with him in this format as well. So Scott, thank you very much for being with us. And maybe we can start by having you talk a little bit about your experience during the current crisis. So of course, communication networks support the teaching and research missions of the university, and all of a sudden they had to adapt to a very different demand profile. And I'm curious to know how this process was in your experience as Vice President for IT and where the main challenges and lessons learned were.
Okay, thanks, Luis. Thanks for having me on today, and it's great to have you back in Virginia with CCI. So Virginia Tech announced that it was going on an extended spring break and moving to remote teaching. That was announced March 11th, and March 23rd we were there. And not only were all of our courses, all of our instructional work being done online, but almost all employees at the university were also working from home. And so what this did, it really changed the delivery chain, if you will, for our services from our own network to local internet service providers. And so on campus, our network traffic is about 1/4 of what it normally would be during an academic semester. At the same time, service providers like AT&T and Comcast were reporting about a 25% increase in their core network traffic. And it's not just that they were seeing more traffic, the nature of that traffic was different as well. And so a lot of residential network providers provide asymmetric delivery, where the assumption is that you are downloading a lot more data into your home than uploading. So you're watching movies and other kinds of things and accessing websites. But what they saw was about a 20% increase in that download traffic, but a 35% increase in upload traffic. So there's a lot more symmetric traffic, which is what you get with video conferencing and voice over internet or voice over IP phones. And the carriers have also seen, and providers have also seen, that Wi-Fi use is up and cellular is down. And that makes sense because people are staying at home like they should. And they've been connecting and transferring data a lot more over their home Wi-Fi network than they have over the cellular network. We've not had any problems with our network capacity really because of the shift to remote. And a lot of the services, especially the sort of the high bandwidth services that our students and our employees are accessing, are in fact not at Virginia Tech, right? They're in the cloud or they're in the vendor's data center. And generally speaking, those vendors have scaled up well, both in their sort of compute capacity, but also in the network capacity coming into their facilities. We have had to increase our capacity for our virtual private network service, or VPN service. And this is how remote users can authenticate and appear to be coming in from the local Virginia Tech network. And some of our services still require that sort of extra level of authentication. And so we had to increase our bandwidth, both in terms of capacity and number of simultaneous users that we could have active at a time. But overall, our security posture hasn't really been affected that much. We run a fairly open network on campus. Today, that would be called a zero trust network. So we don't really rely on our network to be the barrier, the gatekeeper of getting to our servers. We require really those servers to be hardened against attack. We have lost some visibility though in network traffic. We're still seeing what's coming and going from our servers on campus, but we're not seeing what's coming and going in terms of threat vectors and things like that to desktop computers and notebook computers that are running out in folks' homes.
Yeah, so it's very impressive that the ISPs were able to cope with this increase in 25% in the demand. At the same time, there's been a lot of press about new security vulnerabilities that have been exposed by this increase of the use of online communication tools. For example, Zoom, which we're using right now. In your experience, how resilient have the networks and the services been during this time?
Right, and so a lot of people are using some different tools than they were used to using. We've been using Zoom for several years at Virginia Tech, both for meetings as well as for the online instructional graduate programs that we have. But certainly, our use of Zoom has gone way up, just like everyone's use of Zoom has. And in fact, they report to have seen an increase of a factor of 25 times more active users during a day. So not 25%, but 2,500% more active users. They've gotten a lot of scrutiny, and what that scrutiny has exposed for themselves and some other video conferencing and other types of products is that there are some problems. You can think about those problems in kind of two categories. One is that they had some security flaws in their design. Unfortunately, most software that is released these days does have some security flaws, and they're uncovered when they're really receiving a lot of attention, both from security analysts, so-called white hats, but also from cyber criminals and others that are looking to disrupt business for whatever reason. And so what's really important is that vendors respond to those vulnerabilities and work toward fixing them. In the case of Zoom, I've been pleased at their response. Not pleased that they had some of the problems they had to start with, but pleased that they've been responding to fix them. The other type of problem is that there are a lot of new users to Zoom and and other software, and there are ways to misconfigure that and set up meetings that are a little bit too open. And so that's where uninvited guests have come into some Zoom and other video conferencing sessions and caused problems. But Zoom is making some changes to be sort of more secure by default, and that's good. But it will, in fact, probably make the usability a little bit less. The networks themselves have been reasonably secure. In the early days of home Wi-Fi, a lot of the wireless access points and home routers would come out of the box with some pretty poor security configurations by default. People would just install them and let them go, and they had problems. But fortunately, in recent years, the out-of-the-box configurations are more secure. But it's worthwhile for folks to understand how their home Wi-Fi access point and their home routers need to be configured, and to make sure that they're set up to be secure. Another security issue that's come up is phishing, especially so-called spear phishing, where attackers have spoofed individuals. So maybe they spoof the president of a university to make it look like emails coming from the president of the university or from the CEO or CFO of a company. And the attackers realize that people are under stress. They are trying to respond to things quickly during this crisis, and sometimes will make mistakes in terms of providing sensitive information or clicking on links that might install bad software. So it's really important for people to be suspicious of email that they received that may appear to be coming from someone in their organization, but if you look closely, it's really not.
And you already mentioned about the ISP's ability to keep providing service, and for many of us, broadband connectivity to our homes. At the same time, this move towards online education and teleworking has also exposed some issues of digital inequity and poor broadband coverage, especially in rural areas that have always been there, but I think are even more clear now. And what approaches do you think are the most promising to deal with that?
Right, so the move to online instruction and work from home really is uncovering existing digital equity issues, right? And we've known about these for a long time, but they're really getting a lot of visibility now. There are a few things that can be done in terms of loaning cellular hotspots and things like that to address them. But the fundamental solutions will take some time. A lot of times, the technical challenges relate primarily to those areas that are rural, low density, where people are underserved or not served at all because of location. There are approaches with using radio frequency wireless for the last mile. And so there are techniques that have been researched at a number of universities and in companies, including at Wireless at Virginia Tech, to look at spectrum sharing. So how can we use really precious radio frequency spectrum more effectively? And one of the really promising areas for that technique is to use it in rural areas where there's not a lot of other traffic that you have to contend with. Satellite systems are going to be an answer for some places that are very sparsely populated, but cost and capacity are always going to be an issue for those systems just because of their nature. There are also policy issues. I'm not a policy expert, but certainly we know that in the early days of telephony, it was decided really at the federal level that everybody could get telephone service, and there were financial mechanisms put in place to do that, going back to 1934. And so maybe it's time to look at how do we make sure that individuals can get broadband as a basic service, especially for our K-12 students.
And another area that has been attracting a lot of interest, both of researchers and governments and media, is the emergence of different solutions for contact tracing, and in particular, contact tracing using cell phone apps. Can you talk a little bit about the communication technologies that are being used for that, and how do we handle the security and privacy issues that result from that?
Right, so a lot of people have, as we look at contact tracing, one of the first things people have done and sort of jumped to at universities is to think about Wi-Fi, because every time you connect to an access point and you're authenticated to that access point, someone knows that you're there. The problem with Wi-Fi as a technical solution to that, it's very coarse-grained, right? We might know that you're in a building, but we don't know whether you're on the first floor or the second floor. So for contact tracing for COVID-19 transmission, it's really not accurate enough. It would lead to a lot of false negatives, which creates its own problems. There are, of course, concerns about who has access to that data in terms of where people are. Another approach is to use a mobile phone app that's maybe using global positioning system GPS data or Bluetooth localization. So Bluetooth is a wireless technology that allows devices that are near each other to communicate. And so if you have enough people in an area, in a population that are using an app with it turned on, Bluetooth can be used to identify those places, those individuals that are closer. There's some variation in signal strength and sensitivity. And so depending on the particular device someone has, you may get some different results. But you also have a lot of privacy issues there. There are approaches to keep that data sort of on the phone until it needs to be shared, but at some point it's going to be shared. There's what I call the big tech solution. Apple and Google are working together for using Bluetooth to be able to understand when people are close together. And we have concerns about, all of us do, about who has that kind of data. But their approach is to share that with public health departments. And so that gives some level of assurance that it will be used in the right way for public health purposes.
And it seems like at times of a major crisis, like right now, there's an acceleration of the transition between research and commercial product, right? So another area would be the delivery of goods by autonomous vehicles. So I wanted to make sure to talk to you a little bit about that, because I know that Virginia Tech, over the last couple of years, has launched a pilot program in drone delivery in Blacksburg, delivery of burritos, I think. And now there is commercial delivery by drones available in Christiansburg, Virginia. Can you talk a little bit about this process of translating something that was really a research topic not very long ago into a real commercial service?
Right, so Virginia Tech does a lot of research in autonomous systems in the air, on the water, underwater, on the land. And we lead a group of a consortium called the Mid-Atlantic Aviation Partnership, which is one of the Federal Aviation Administration's test sites. And 3 years ago, Virginia Tech, working as part of this partnership, worked with Wing, which is a subsidiary of of Alphabet, no, not Apple, of Alphabet, which is Google's parent company, and Chipotle to deliver burritos. And now, last fall, Wing scaled up that delivery demonstration from being something very constrained to actually delivering products to people's homes, or their front yards at least, from multiple stores. So for example, and that was kind of a novelty back in the fall, but now it's becoming something that's important to some people. So you can get over-the-counter medications, for example, from Walgreens that are delivered to an individual, so that an at-risk person doesn't have to venture out to the store. And in fact, if you're craving some cold Java, there's a coffee shop in Christiansburg that will get that to you.
Great. I will stop here, Scott, and see if there are any questions from our audience. Brianna, do we have any questions?
It doesn't look like we have any questions at this time, but if anyone has one, they can type it into the Q&A feature and I will read it out loud for our speakers.
Okay, if there are no questions, then let me thank everyone for your time today, for joining us, and in particular, thank you, Scott, for being with us and giving us this perspective about how it is to lead a big IT service for a big university during this time. As I mentioned before, this is the second of 3 webinars that we're currently planned in this series. The next one is 2 weeks from today at the same time, 11:30 Eastern. And I will be talking to Professor Fred Leder and Professor Iria Giuffrida. They're both professors of law at William & Mary, and they'll be talking about the introduction of technology into the courtroom system. So I look forward to that, and look forward to having you all join us in 2 weeks. Thank you very much again.
Thank you, Luis.